All right. Good afternoon, good evening, class. This is Professor Burke. I'm going to take us through the module that was presented today, Monday, April 22nd, on wireless and mobile security. Let's go ahead and get started. All right. The charts are in Canvas. Um, the intent in this presentation is to highlight some key components, at least from a security perspective, key components within wireless communication. That's radio wave communication. We're going to really focus in on cell phones, smartphones, and Wi-Fi. Those are the two areas we're going to focus in on, although there are other types of radio wave communications, and they're very interesting, but that's not what we'll focus on in this presentation. Here's your agenda. We'll go through some of the wireless technologies that are available. We're then going to zero in on mobile or smartphones and some of the enabling technology under that and security concerns. Then we're going to go to Wi-Fi. And then finally, we're going to focus in on something called mobile device management policies. And that has to do with an organization allowing us as users, employees, and students to use our own devices as compared to company issued devices. That creates additional security concerns and exposures. All right, well, let's get into wireless. This is the space that is exploding. Not only phones and mobility, of course, laptops, but all the IoT, all the sensors and cameras and devices that are also connecting to the internet. So we're seeing exponential growth going into the future. And we're also seeing some very interesting technology, network and cell phone technology becoming available that's bringing all that IoT technology, data, processing together. So obviously, this is a very high growth, high demand area, but it's also creating high risk in certain spaces. All right, so the radio frequencies, you can look here and see the spectrum from very low power or low radio wave, 500, 200, whatever, gigahertz, megahertz, all the way up to very high powered, more, if you will, defense, government, and public safety related radio waves. Right in the middle is Wi-Fi, and some of the things that we work with, cell phones, are down in the multiple gigahertz. But again, there's a whole range, and depending upon the device, it will align to a radio frequency. It is determined, it is designed, it is authorized to work within a certain range of radio frequencies, and that way they do not conflict. All right, some technology concerns. So for the final, know these. These are pretty straightforward. I'm going to point out a couple. We'll talk about Wi-Fi today and Bluetooth, but NFC, that's near field communication, and that's very close wireless transmissions, and you see it probably in your Apple Pay, your Google Wallet, and things like that. So that's where a device will emit a small signal to another device, sensor, or whatever. Might also be a smart card. Okay. And then RFID, that is also like a device that is beaconing or can be read by another device. And it's most commonly seen in your car, your Easy Pass mode that sits in the windshield. That is a device that is read by sensors as you pass through on the highway. Okay. And then cell, we'll talk about Zigbee and Z-Wave. We talked about that in our last module. That has to do with devices, a frequency oftentimes used in the home, things like washing machines and smart refrigerators and thermostats are working at a protocol. Is using a protocol, very low frequency protocol. Okay. And then SATCOM, we're not going to get into that. That's interterrestrial satellites, very much government and defense focused. And then infrared is a way to also communicate over radio waves. So our focus is on Wi-Fi. I'll include in that Bluetooth and cell phones. Okay, so a quick comment here as you go through the presentation. Pay attention to the charts that have a title that has yellow highlights. If it has not been highlighted, it will not be on the final. Okay, so fair game. If it is yellow highlighting, it could be on the final. Okay, you can look through this. This is a little more information on those definitions from the prior page. Okay, this is not on the final. Keep it moving. So I posed a question in class, what are the top threats to a smartphone? And I think the key message we wanted to come away with, a smartphone, since we're talking mobility now, or mobile phones, uh, by definition, it is mobile, it is moving, so you have a huge risk to lost and stolen. And maybe it's accidental, but lost and stolen devices are a major threat or a major concern. So let's go ahead and get into it. Like any device, it's pretty much the same concerns, other than physical security becomes kind of paramount. Phishing, smishing, and so on, all the social engineering, obviously lost and stolen. Somebody could steal your SIM card and then has at least your data or your credentials. Your apps, you could have unauthorized apps download onto your phone, like malware, nuisanceware, spyware, things of that sort. Here's another one. Although we're talking mobile phone, most smartphones have multiple options for connecting. If you're in the house or around a Wi-Fi, your phone may connect via Wi-Fi. So it now becomes exposed like any device on a public Wi-Fi. Okay. And then you can read the rest: surveillance, spying, ransomware. But if you notice, this is pretty much the same list that any device is exposed to, other than the SIM card and maybe an increased risk of being physically lost or stolen. Okay. So a smartphone or a mobile phone, as we said before, could connect via a cell tower. And by definition, its mobility says as it moves along, it is changing cell towers and reconnecting. It's being passed cell tower to cell tower. It also could connect via Wi-Fi, and that's mostly when it's stationary, you're in a building or facility. That may be a better, more stable option than a cell tower. Okay. What's also interesting about a smartphone is, in addition to Wi-Fi, in addition to cell, it also has normally Bluetooth, NFC, and maybe some other network connectivity. It does Apple Pay. It does Bluetooth enabled. All that is in the device, otherwise known as your smartphone. Okay. So the key threat we've identified here is the mobility increases the opportunity for it to be lost or stolen, and then malicious or an adversary taking advantage, getting data that it shouldn't get, they shouldn't get. So security, there are a number of things we'll talk about, but I want to mention that in a modern phone, in iOS, an Apple phone, or in an Android phone, there are encryptions for the disk and files. That is, it's baked into the software. The only thing might be, depending upon what you're doing, make sure you have it turned on. So the device is encrypted, has software that supports encryption at the file level and at the disk level. Okay. Calling out quickly 5G, that's probably the most important enabling technology that we're seeing right now as the networks move. Verizon and T-Mobile and all the above move to 5G and market that. That's giving us increased throughput, a capacity, efficiency, and all the above. Much of that you may not see as a mobile phone user. The real benefit from 5G is from the IoT devices. So it can support more sensors and cameras and autonomous driving vehicles and all the above. It can, the density, the capacity, the bandwidth is so rich, so powerful, so much more um, um, robust, that it's going to get filled with new applications, edge computing, fog computing, all that's going to run in the 5G space. You won't even notice 4G to 5G from a phone call perspective. Okay. So this chart's not highlighted, so we're going to keep it moving. It's just restating that 5G is a major step forward in terms of capacity, throughput, bandwidth, and all the above. Vulnerabilities, you can read the chart. You could leak data. Open Wi-Fi is an exposure, and we went through this in an earlier chart. You could have weak security on your applications, poor passwords, out-of-date devices, and this is the constant theme in the class. Make sure you're using strong passwords. Make sure you've got encryption on. Make sure you are doing your updates and your antivirus and all the right things. Okay. In addition, there's some specific exploits you see in the mobile phone space. One is called jailbreaking. That's where somebody is basically has taken your phone, is trying to unlock your phone so they can reuse it or get to the data. So they are trying to get in, they escalate their privilege on the phone and try to take control. Your phone has been designed, if you will, locked in to your phone number and into your identity as a Verizon user or Sprint user or whatever. So jailbreaking is basically breaking your phone off of the existing network connections, network identity, and creating a new identity. Rooting is similar, but it's going in and getting to the operating system and bypassing the controls, the security controls that are in place. Now, modern operating systems, Android and iOS, are very good at preventing that. That's very difficult to do. So as long as you're running a trusted operating system on your cell phone, you should be in pretty good shape. And you're current, you're not back level. Side loading is where somehow, some way, an application gets installed on your smart device, your smartphone, that was not intended. So you didn't go to the iTunes or the Apple Store or the Google Store to get it. You got it from some nefarious source. So side loading is apps that are getting on your device that shouldn't get on your device, or from a less than trusted source. Tethering. All right. So tethering, and they use the example like a hotspot. So it's a way to, yeah, I might connect to your device as a hotspot, and your device has some authority to get to some other secure resource. So I'm kind of daisy chaining off of another device, or connecting. So tethering basically to connect to a resource or a device that has further authorities to take you to something you might otherwise not be authorized to get to. Okay, so a quick chart, you can look at it, but in the Android and the iOS space, they have all kinds of features on your phone. You just have to make sure you're using them. Obviously, each device will have all kinds of passwords, be they pins and passwords and face IDs and fingerprints and all kind of controls. Another one I'll point out on the Android, I'm not sure about the iPhone, but on Android, you can have a factory reset option turned on. If somebody puts the wrong password in, say 10, 15, or 20 times, it'll automatically reboot to the factory reset and take away the ability to get to user data. One option that we like, everybody seems to like, is Find My Device. So on the iPhone, and I guess on an Android phone, it's a way, when it's lost, stolen, misplaced, that you can go back and find where you left that phone, where its last location was. What's neat about location also, side benefit, is maybe a family member you want location on, so you can keep track of your family members wherever they may be or as they travel. All right, so these are features and functions that are just baked into the modern phones. Just make sure you've turned them on and you're using them correctly. Bluetooth is a wireless radio frequency, but you have to be in very short range. In this case, it said within 32 feet. Oftentimes you need to be within, 5 or 6 feet away for it to work and work effectively. It's transmitting in a very low gigahertz band, 2.4. And since Bluetooth, I guess it's 2.1, encryption has been mandatory and available after pairing occurs. So your vulnerability is when you start to pair. So I would call out in Bluetooth, you do have a bit of a vulnerability if you have pairing on. Let's say somebody's sitting right next to you and they have their pairing on, and then somehow they get connected to your phone, they get connected to your smartwatch, whatever. So you got to be careful as you turn pairing on what's in your immediate vicinity. Okay. So we have some attack types: bluejacking. You get unsolicited messages coming to you. It's like spam over Bluetooth. Blue snarfing is somebody gets unauthorized access to your device, takes control of your device. Blue bugging is eavesdropping on your device. Somehow somebody has paired in and they're listening in. And then a denial of service for Bluetooth is somehow the bad guys or the adversaries are knocking down your ability to connect or stay connected Bluetooth. A couple of countermeasures: turn your Bluetooth off when you're not in use. When it's not in use, make sure you're patching it, the firmware. Turn off discovery or pairing mode. Turn that off. If you don't need it, it doesn't need to be on all the time. Also, your settings, make sure you've got them locked down, and then run your antivirus. Pretty much follow the manufacturer's recommendations on these things. All right, let's make the turn into Wi-Fi. Terms, we've covered these in class. I'm not going to go into those. First is the protocol. 802.11 is the protocol for modern Wi-Fi. We'll get into that in a minute. And then there are some device IDs: SSID, ESSID, and the BSSID. You can read that. You should be well familiar with what those are. Keep moving forward with 802.11. Again, Wi-Fi is simple packetized data that's coming and moving through radio waves. It's normally in the 2.4 gigahertz band. Couple things mentioned here. Interesting statistic that most average home, U.S. home, has 12 devices connected. 12. And that's expected to, within a year, go to 20. So 12 will be 20 and continue to grow exponentially, even in your home, your apartment, and so on. All right, so a couple of standards. Just want for context that there was a Wi-Fi 4. It was running on 802.11 and runs fine. Runs fine, 600 megabits per second, runs fine. It has been improved by Wi-Fi 5, 802.11 AC, that's at 3.5 gigahertz. It's great, it's wonderful, unless you've got a ton of concurrent devices trying to communicate. There are some limitations. And for that, now Wi-Fi 6 is on its way, being introduced at 9.6 gigabytes per second. It allows for more simultaneous devices. You are probably and normally connected to a resource that's running at Wi-Fi 5, 802.11 AC. And what you can do is look at your Wi-Fi properties on your device by going to your Wi-Fi properties on your device and then looking at the hardware properties. You'll see what protocol and what encryption is running on your Wi-Fi connection. Okay. And here's an example of Wi-Fi properties. This is a Windows device, but if I brought my Windows device up, it says, hey, I'm running at Wi-Fi 5. My encryption, we'll talk about in a second, is WPA2. And I'm at 5 gigahertz, okay? And some additional information. So when in doubt, go to your Wi-Fi properties. You're going to find all kinds of helpful information about your connection, about your MAC address, your IP address, the SSID. So for example, an example here to the right, my access point, instead of HU Wi-Fi, I'm connected to my home router called Orb 107. Okay. All right, this is a backup chart, but more on Wi-Fi 4, 5, and 6, 802.11 protocols. Okay. I am not, this class, since we're late in the semester, we're not going to get deep into encryption. Just know that encryption in Wi-Fi started with WEP. That was pretty good, but it had some vulnerabilities. The keys weren't strong. There were ways to hack in. So that was replaced by WPA. It's Wi-Fi Protected Access back in 2004. That was good and effective, but the keys against were not strong enough. So WPA has now been replaced by WPA2. This is the predominant standard for encryption on Wi-Fi devices. So it's stronger encryption, stronger integrity, stronger keys, all the above. So just know that's the current level. That's why I've double highlighted WPA2. Now, the one thing I do want to mention is your device, when you connect to Wi-Fi, your device is downward compatible. So you have a modern device, laptop, phone, whatever, you connect and you're looking to connect to WPA2, but the access point may say, I'm not at WPA2. The access point may say, hey, I'm at WEP. Your device has the option of being downward compatible because you want to get that connection. So your device may say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and connect at an older encryption mode. And you might connect at an encryption mode that is vulnerable. So that is a exposure. Is when a Wi-Fi device is put out there, maybe a fake one. And it's saying, hey, I want to connect, but I don't support modern encryption. Let's go back and use an older form, which is more vulnerable. Okay, this is backup. All right. When you connect for Wi-Fi and you're talking to the access point, this is the important thing I wanted to mention. When you connect to the access point, you have not connected to the internet yet. You're just connecting to the access point. And essentially, your MAC address on your device is connecting to the MAC address on the access point. Once that connection occurs, then we connect to the internet. So it's a two-step process. So first, getting to the access point, 4 steps. Broadcast, that's where the access point is beaconing and sending out its ID. HU Wi-Fi, HU Wi-Fi, or HU guest, and it's sending beaconing, sending signals out. And that's why when you open your laptop and you turn Wi-Fi on, it gets a signal. It's like a beep, a beacon, if you will, of access points that are in your vicinity. Okay. Next is network discovery. That's where your device will say, hey, let me probe that HU Wi-Fi and let me see if I'm compatible with HU Wi-Fi or that SSID. Okay. Okay. Authentication is say, oh, well, it looks like we're compatible. Let's go ahead. I want to authenticate. This is where on that access point, your device has to authenticate. And if a password is required or a user ID, you have to enter that. And there's a handshake going on authentication. We recommend, unless you're really in a public space, that you put a password on your access point. And then finally, association, key exchange is going on, everything's happened, the handshake looks good, then you have association where now we're ready to send data. We have connected, okay? The point I want to make here is you're not connected to the network, you're just connected to the access point. The next step, we go to, in this case, to the DCHP. Now we want to talk to the internet, we need an IP address. And the dynamic host configuration protocol is used by a server to say, oh, I have somebody connected. Let me connect them to the network. And I'm going to assign them an IP address. So there's a 4-step process. They discover, they're going to offer you an IP address. You request it. Then you acknowledge. It's a back and forth, bang, 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 bang. And now that IP address has been assigned to you. Now, remember in Howard and most organizations, that IP address is probably a private IP address. You're going to get a 10 dot something or a 192.168, a private IP. You're not internet facing yet, but you're at least on the private network internally. There are other things that go on to get you to the internet, which we won't cover here. That's a different lecture. So vulnerabilities. In the Wi-Fi, somebody could attack and say, hey, I'm going to get on that access point, even though it has a password, and I'll use a brute force or a dictionary. I'm going to crack the password to the Wi-Fi, the access point password, right? Then there's some identity exposure things, as if it is beaconing, I might be able to say, I notice my neighbor has a Wi-Fi access point. It's open, it's free. Maybe I can use free Wi-Fi at the neighbor. So by beaconing, by broadcasting your Wi-Fi access point, you're exposing yourself to identity and potentially eavesdropping and channel hijacking, and so on. So essentially, somebody could try to break into your access point and either get on it, take advantage of it, or get on it and take control of your access point. Okay. So here's some examples of exploits. Piggybacking is a technique where I basically am going to ride somebody else's connection. Somebody else is authorized to connect to that Wi-Fi access point, and I kind of ride it and steal the session. I can hijack the session as they connect. War driving, it's kind of misleading, but simply put, that's where you quote unquote drive around and look for an open Wi-Fi network. And you might be you're in General Motors headquarters, and all of a sudden you notice, oh, there's an open Wi-Fi network on the 7th floor. And that might allow you to get into their internal network because it's open for whatever reason, and perform an exploit. So war driving is basically walking around, driving around, looking for open access points. Evil twin is when an adversary or a bad guy puts up a fake access point. An evil twin is a fake access point, and you connect to them. Now, frequently, they will then also connect you to the internet, but they are now sitting in the middle. It's like a man in the middle. You've connected to their device on the way to the internet, and they are sniffing, eavesdropping on everything going to and from. Okay. And then the rest you can look at. Somebody could steal your computer, look over your shoulder, or get unauthorized access to your system. Okay, and then here are some definitions. You can look at those yourself. And then here's a quick backup chart. We won't go into war driving, but it's simply driving around looking for open access points. And then there's a term called war flying. Same thing, but you're using a plane. You're flying around looking for open access points. Okay. The countermeasures. First, be aware and be warned that when you go to Wi-Fi, it could be public. Treat it like a publicly accessible network. Therefore, encrypt all your data transmissions. Use encryptions. Use a VPN. Use encryption. Strong passwords, and even getting on the access point. Make sure the access point is asking for a password. If you have an access point, you may want to disable the broadcasting of the SSID or the Wi-Fi name. So an access point can exist. It does not need to beacon or broadcast its name. You can turn that off. So only people who really know it's there would know how to connect to it. Okay, filtering is basically having like a list of MAC addresses that can connect to your access point. You can use firewalls, intrusion detection, and as always, make sure you patch and use antivirus. Okay. This is not here. Now, finally, the final piece of this lecture is that we have something called mobile device management. And this is the concept of all kinds of devices owned by all types of folks are connecting to the modern organization's network. That means people can use their own devices. They may have a company-provided device. They may be sharing devices. There are all kinds of devices connecting. And the takeaway here, the key objective is to make sure you have very strong policies in place. Very strong policies. And here are a couple of examples. Make sure anything and anybody who connects to your network is using an agreed to password policy. If it's strong passwords, two-factor, maybe limited attempts, lockouts, things like that. Also, devices that are connecting to your network, if they are company owned, you may have policies in place that automatically wipe data off. If that device is reported lost or stolen, the next time that device tries to connect to a network, it will automatically erase or wipe its hard drive. Okay. You may have a policy about what applications can be downloaded on a device and where they can be downloaded from. You have to go to the Enterprise Apple Store or to Apple or Google Store, to a really trusted source. Patch, antivirus, use encryption, and so on. Geofencing and geotagging, that's simply saying, all right, I have a device, it's authorized to get on the Howard network, but only if it's in Washington, D.C. or within 10 miles of Washington, D.C. I am not allowing any device more than 10, 15, 20, 100 miles out connect geographically to my network. So you can do that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And again, here are some things you see in device management policy or different device types. You got CYOD, choose your own device, COPE, company issued, personally enabled, COBO, corporate owned, business only, and BYOD. Now I'm going to go back to COPE just quickly. That means the company's giving you a device, but you can do your Facebook and your social media and some personal things. So it's company issued, but you can do personal work on it. Of course, BYOD is kind of the predominant device we're seeing now. That's your personal device, laptop, phone, whatnot. And the company has to be very careful, but it can still enforce if you are connecting to a company or organization's network, you may have to make sure encryption is on and passwords are strong and two-factor is turned on and all the right things to connect to the network. Okay. All right. So BYOD, as we said, that's predominant. That's what employees and faculty and students want to do. They do not want to lug around a second machine or device. Mm-hmm. And we're up to our summary. You can look through this on your own, but I will say only the charts that are highlighted will be on the final. We're going to focus really in on Wi-Fi, mobile phones, and Bluetooth, and then a little bit on potentially on mobile device management. All right. And with that, I hope you enjoy your day. We'll see you at your final exam. Contact me if you have any questions, and I'll see you at our next meeting. Bye-bye.